Hey guys, this is the video for Wednesday, January 6th. And then yesterday we talked about how we can split a rectangle into equal size squares. So let me get my marker. All right, so let's look at this one about Dan. Dan started drawing squares to fill this rectangle. Draw the rest of the squares. So we can see where the rows go. Remember rows, row your boat. Hold out your arms. They go left to right. So let's fill in the rest of these. Now remember, this is not going to be perfect. And that's okay. All right, so I filled in the rows. Now let's fill in the columns. Oh. Okay, and in a perfect world, these would be equal, but they're not. So let's look at this one. So we did what number 2 wanted us to do. We drew the rest of the squares. Number 3 says, how many rows of squares are there? So rows go left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6 rows. Now my second question right here says, how many squares are in each row? So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 in each row. This is hard on my computer. Sorry, guys. 4 in each row. Okay. Number 4 says, how many squares are there in all? So if I know this is 4, I can skip count by 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. Okay, so you can sing your 4 song. So there's 24 squares in all. Now remember, this keyword means we need the total. Okay. Number 5 says, this rectangle is the same size as the one above. Dan started drawing larger squares to fill his rectangle. Draw the rest of the squares. So let me do something to make this easier. All right. So if I want to draw the rest of the squares, I'm going to continue going down. This is much easier. Okay. So I've got the rows. I've got my rows done. So let's put the number in each row. Let's finish that out. Maybe you can see it behind this. Okay. So we drew the rest of the squares. Number 6 says, how many rows of squares are there? Let me get my pen back. All right. How many rows? Row your boat, left to right. 1, 2, 3. So there's 3 rows. Ooh. Okay, and then the next one, how many squares are in each row? So all we do is count the number in each group. 1, 2. So there's 2 in each row. All right. How many squares are there in all? So let's count. In all means I need the total. 2, 4, 6. 2, 4, 6, 8. You could sing your 2 song. 2, 4, 6. So there's 6 in all. Okay. Notice these 2 rectangles are the same size, but do they have same size squares? I hope you said no, because this one has smaller squares. This one has larger squares, but in each rectangle, the shapes, the squares inside are the same size, so they are equal. All right. Now these, I want you to read these. We're going to read these twice. How did you know how many squares were missing in the first rectangle? So let's go back. Here's the first one. So it said how did you know how many squares were missing in the first rectangle? So I want you to turn and talk to a partner about how you knew how to fill these in. All right, so Miss Merritt, if you can, will you just pause this video and let them turn and talk with a neighbor? All right, guys, I hope you and your partner talked about how the rows were already kind of done for you, and all you had to do was continue them across, okay? And see how these columns were already there. We just had to bring them all the way down. So if we fill in the rows and columns, that's how we can find out how many we're missing. All right. Number 9 says, how did you know how many squares were missing in the second rectangle? So same question. Here's the second rectangle right here. So I want you and your partner to talk about how you knew how many squares were missing. All right, Miss Merritt, if you will pause this video. All right, guys, it's the same thing as the first rectangle. All you had to do was continue these lines out because they were already kind of done for you on the left side. So if I just continue them out and down, we fill in those missing squares. Oh, I kind of jumped ahead of myself. So number 10 is what we talked about earlier. The two rectangles are the same size. Why is there a different number of squares in each one? Okay, so it says the two rectangles are the same size. Yes. So why is there a different amount of squares in each one? Okay, so Miss Merritt, if you will pause this video, guys, turn and talk to your neighbor about number 10. All right, guys, I hope you talked about the reason there's a different number of squares in each is because these squares in the first shape are super small. So if they're small, there's going to be more of them to take up that space, to take up more of that space. Okay, and that's the inside's called the area. We're going to talk about this next week. We'll talk about area. So the space on the inside of this one, these squares are larger. So if the squares on the inside are bigger, it's going to take up more space, so we need less squares. That's why there's 24 squares in the first one and only 6 in the second one. Okay, so if you turn and talk with your neighbor about these 3 questions, you can give yourself 3 snaps. Good job. Okay, Miss Merritt, there should be dot paper for you to hand out for the students to use. And guys, you are going to draw these same shapes, these same squares, these same rectangles with same size squares. Kind of like how it was done here for you. So you can split these up any way you want as long as the squares on the inside are equal. So let me say that again. You can partition, remember that word from yesterday, we can partition or split up these rectangles to show same size squares as long as the squares on the inside are equal size. Okay, so I want you to draw these on your graph paper, your grid paper. All right, so Miss Merritt, if you will, guys, I'll pause this video, and guys, I want you to draw these 2 same squares. Pay attention to how many columns there are in each. There's 4 columns. 4 rows. Rows go left to right. 4 rows, and then columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 columns. So 4 rows, 8 columns. Go ahead and pause this video. All right, guys. let's go ahead and I'm going to split up my rectangles into same size squares. Now, if you did these different than I did, that's okay. We don't have to do them the same. As long as the squares on the inside are equal. Okay, so one of the easiest ways to do this is just split up the individual squares on the inside. That way it shows 4 rows, 8 columns. So we just bring these columns down. We connect, kind of like connect the dots. Y'all ever played connect the dots? Okay. So I'm just making, see how these squares on the inside are the same size? And if they're not, they're off a little bit, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so I've done this one. Now let's move over to this one. And I'm just going to split them up, into same size squares. You didn't have to do it like me, but I thought this would have been the easiest way. Okay, so in this first shape, are the squares the same size? Yes. So in the second shape, are the squares the same size? Yes. So in this first rectangle, if we remember what is 4 times 8, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32. So there's 32 on the first shape, 32 squares. Then on the second shape, you can just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Long as you could partition them or split them up any way you wanted, as long as the squares on the inside were equal. All right, so that's it for today. After this video, I want you guys to do the practice sheet pages. 285 is on the front, 286 is on the back. So if you finish the practice sheet pages, then I want you to do extra math. If you finish extra math, guys, you can get on eSpark. Just make sure that number 1 and number 2 is done. Don't forget your homework is due Friday. Let me know. Miss Merritt has my number. Let me know if you guys have any questions.